Hello, I'm Paul Perello, and welcome to the Philly Factor. Are you looking for something completely different to do? Yeah, you say you're tired of going to the mall, you're tired of taking that walk through the neighborhood, you're tired of traveling, down to the Jersey Shore, whatever it is. You're looking for something completely different. What about going to the cemetery? Yeah, you heard me correctly, the cemetery. How about a historic cemetery? Well, you have heard of Laurel Hill Cemetery, I'm sure, especially given the recent burial of Harry Callis in Laurel Hill Cemetery. But it's more than just a cemetery. It's an outdoor sculptural garden, a historical gem, and a truly unique resource. It also happens to be one of the few cemeteries in the United States to be honored with the designation of being a National Historic Landmark. Joining us on this edition of the Philly Factor is Gwendolyn Kaminsky, Director of Development and Programs for Friends of Laurel Hill Cemetery. Gwen, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Paul.
Laurel Hill Cemetery is located in East Falls.
That's correct.
Exactly how old is Laurel Hill?
We date back to 1836. Our first burial was in October of that year.
Okay.
So in this October, we're 172 years.
Oh, there you go. I'm terrible at math, so I'm glad you didn't ask me that question.
Okay.
But up until this point, so when we look back at this 172 years, if you will, when people died in the city of Philadelphia, they were usually buried in churchyards, burial areas that were adjacent to churches in the neighborhoods of Philadelphia, correct?
That is correct.
So what then caused for the development of this 78-acre plot, if you will, known as Laurel Hill?
Well, in the 1800s, right around the time when Laurel Hill was founded, the city, the nation was at the height of industrialization, and these churchyards and burial grounds were constantly being ripped up to make way for roads, buildings, new construction, and people's loved ones were constantly being moved to mass graves. Oftentimes they would go to a cemetery and it would be gone. They wouldn't know where to find them. Oftentimes roads were built right over cemeteries. Our primary founder was John J. Smith. He was a Quaker. He was also with the Library Company of Philadelphia. He had the same experience. His 5-year-old daughter died. She was buried in a Quaker burial ground, and he was so distraught by the condition of this overcrowded, messy space that perhaps one day wouldn't even exist, that he had the notion to form a place where people could place their loved ones and be assured that they would be there in perpetuity.
Now, where Laurel Hill is in East Falls, 170 years ago, is it just prairie, farmland? What's out there in East Falls? Is it developed?
It wasn't East Falls at the time. Laurel Hill was actually founded 3 miles outside of the city. So the land, even though we're very much within Philadelphia today and very urban neighborhoods in East Falls, bordering Strawberry Mansion, right up the street from Manayunk, we were actually 3 miles outside of the city at that time. So it was really private country estates of wealthy industrialists and merchants of the time.
You know, when you're traveling past Laurel Hill, because of the enormous monuments that these people would erect on the burial spots for their loved ones, and there's a whole history and I guess architecture of these monuments that go up at Laurel Hill then over the years, and we should also mention that while we think of it as a National Historic Landmark, 1% of that 78 acres is still available for private burials.
That is correct. That's how a lot of people do know us, by the way. I should touch on, while our main entrance is on Ridge Avenue, again in East Falls, we actually border Kelly Drive and overlook the Schuylkill River. Magnificent views because the cemetery sits 100 feet above water level. So great views of the Schuylkill. You can see all the regattas from the cemetery and everything. That's how a lot of people know us. They drive by on Kelly Drive on their way to work in the morning, and they see these, magnificent mausoleums and monuments, and they have no idea that we welcome them to come inside, to explore on their own, to ride their bike, to walk their dog, to take a tour, to have a picnic. I mean, the list goes on and on. And What was your original question?
The question is that there is still private burial spots
Right,
within
right.
Laurel Hill.
So
It's not just a National Historic Landmark.
So not only do they not know that they can access the cemetery, but they also don't realize that, yes, we are still burying people. One of our most recent burials, as you mentioned in the beginning of the program, was that of Harry Callis,
Sure.
the late Philadelphia sportscaster. We don't have a great amount of space left, and it really is prime real estate if you want to look at it like that. The great late Philadelphians have always been buried there. Names like Rittenhouse, Widener, Elkins, they're all interred in Laurel Hill Cemetery, and that tradition, our city tradition kind of continues down in that legacy. And a lot of the well-known people of today are also choose Laurel Hill as their final resting place because, it's just such history there.
We mentioned Harry Callis and that Harry is interred there. If someone wants to go and visit not only Harry's resting place, but the resting place of the Rittenhouse, members of the Rittenhouse family, is it up to them to find these graves, or you mentioned people can stroll through, they could take tours. I know there's a cell phone tour that we'll get into here in a moment,
Sure.
but let's say somebody is just passing through, they want to visit a grave, and I know there are many Civil War generals that are buried there. There might be a Civil War buff that sees this show and says, gee, I would like to see if so-and-so is buried there. How could they find the grave?
We're open 7 days a week, and there's someone in the office during all of our open hours, at least one person, and often more, as well as some grounds crew. We have maps, several different maps that speak to the different themes that people might be interested in when they're visiting Laurel Hill. We also have a $5 guide booklet, in addition to the cell phone tour, which is free except for the use of your minutes. So we have lots of different resources. We also have about 45 public programs and tours that we schedule throughout the year. So almost every single weekend there's something going on at Laurel Hill. And starting in 2010, you're going to find things to do on the weekday nights as well. And our tours and programs touch on a vast variety of topics, art and architecture, the war generals, genealogy, and then, even getting into different themes, like, for instance, this coming fall, we do tours about, the sinner scandals and suicides in Laurel Hill. Around Valentine's Day, we touch on the love stories. St. Patrick's Day, we do another program. So we're always having fun there, and we really make the cemetery a really happening, lively place to be.
Yeah, many people may not think of the cemetery as the real happening place to be. But back in the good old days when Laurel Hill was just the scene of many affluent Philadelphians being interred there, it was not uncommon for families to visit the cemetery and take along a picnic basket and spend time there. Today often is the case. People go to the cemetery once or twice a year to pay their respects. They're there for 30 seconds and then they're gone. But way back when, it was not uncommon for families to go and take along a picnic basket and spend time at the cemetery.
Absolutely not. Remember that Laurel Hill is a Victorian cemetery, and the Victorians dealt with death much differently than we do today. It was a part of their everyday lives. So, instead of kind of pushing it into the corner, they embraced it. And they really did look at it as an opportunity for, when their own time came for everlasting reunion. And in life, they would frequent the cemetery. Laurel Hill was founded before public parks existed. So really, Laurel Hill was the public park of Philadelphia. In fact, so much so that, we received 30,000 visitors in a single season. And some of the same persons who founded Laurel Hill went on to be part of the council that founded Fairmount Park. So in a way, Fairmount Park came out of Laurel Hill, and their need to kind of bring a little bit of the idea of a final place of rest back into Laurel Hill, because it really had the idea of recreation had kind of overtaken it at that point.
Let's talk a little bit about the relationship of your group to Laurel Hill Cemetery, because your group is a nonprofit organization that was formed to basically care for the cemetery or promote the cemetery through a lot of these programs that, a lot of the tours that we've been talking about? So your relationship of your group to the cemetery.
Right. And the group that you're referring to is the Friends of Laurel Hill Cemetery. So when Laurel Hill was founded, while Laurel Hill was founded in 1836, which I should correct myself, that was actually 173 years ago. We're approaching our 175th anniversary in 2011, which we're excited about. The Friends of Laurel Hill weren't founded until 1978,
Okay.
so actually relatively recently. They were founded as a 501c3, and their main mission was really to promote and preserve Laurel Hill Cemetery. So all of these great programs that are going on, the Friends are responsible for that. All of the preservation work that the cemetery is so desperately in need of, being as old as it is, the Friends are responsible for raising the funding and grants to enable that work. And really in promoting the idea of Laurel Hill as a place of retreat and recreation for the public of today.
When you talk about preservation work that is needed at the cemetery, are we talking preserving many of these monuments and mausoleums and gravestones that are there that have probably been there for decades, as long as century and 3/4 almost? Who's responsible for making sure that the gravestones are kept and the grass is cut and that the monument isn't tipping over because the ground is starting to shift because of the traffic on Kelly Drive? Is that the responsibility of your group, or is it the responsibility of the families that have the plots at Laurel Hill?
Well, individual plots are really the responsibility of the family in a sense. And when a person purchased a piece of land, they have the option to put an endowment on that lot to enable annual work to be completed with the interest that's kicked off from those monies. Therefore, the lots at the cemetery that have the endowment, they get that annual treatment, whereas those that don't, they're kind of on a waiting list because we have over 100,000 people buried there. Wow. We estimate about 33,000 monuments, 11,000 family lots, with multiple burials. When you're talking about that amount, and just a few people, because Laurel Hill, it does not have the resources that it requires to really the conservation and preservation. And that is why the Friends try to raise the money towards those projects.
I know there are a number of projects that are actually coming up. We have the Gravediggers Ball, which this year is going to be in honor of Harry Callis.
That's correct.
People, I think they're going to put the website up there. Laurel Hill Cemetery, the laurelhillcemetery.org is the website where you get more information about the Gravediggers Ball. Again, the purpose of that is to support the work of the Friends of Laurel Hill Cemetery. If you want to make a monetary donation, you're always looking for donations. How about volunteers that might be remotely interested in getting involved in an organization? They might be intrigued by the fact that they might be a tour guide to give guided tours of the cemetery. I'm guessing that it might be a relatively quiet job. In the 78-acre cemetery, there's not much activity going on, is there? Of this world, maybe.
Oh, there. You know what? The possibilities are limitless. That's what makes it so great. Speaking of those 100,000 burials, I mean, there's endless themes. There's endless, programs and projects we can undertake that are really fun and unique. And we've had a lot of fun doing so already. We love tour guides. We're always looking for new tour guides, and we need more tour guides because more and more people are finding out about Laurel Hill, and they want to come out to the programs. And so we're always looking for new perspectives. You get access to our archives. Our archives date back to 1836. We have original interment documents on all of our residents, as well as all the biographical information and maps and and blueprints and everything like that goes along with it. So lots of neat stuff that a lot of history buffs like to
Sure.
get their hands on. So that's always an added bonus.
I kiddingly said that it must be a relatively quiet place to work and tour, and maybe you're interested in the paranormal. Maybe you come out at dusk or at nighttime. And I know that there's a Dialogue of the Dead is another program that
Sure.
you're running, a paranormal exploration of Laurel Hill Cemetery. And people might say, well, the cemetery is it's going to be 175 years old.
Right.
I'm sure that those spirits must come back from time to time and like to share some of their stories. So, is the place haunted?
I don't know.
You don't know?
I guess you have to come out for yourself and figure out what you think. Some people definitely get the vibes, and some people have had those experiences. And we have a number of local, regional paranormal investigation groups that like to come out and conduct their own readings and everything of Laurel Hill. And South Jersey Ghost Research is one of them. That's who is conducting the program on the 3rd. They've been out to Laurel Hill a ton of times. So you get to hear all about their findings that they've picked up on audio and video and what have you in those prior investigations.
How do you balance, I guess, the interest factor of the public, whether it's the paranormal program or the Gravediggers Ball? How do you balance that with being mindful and respectful of the people who are buried there? I mean, that's sort of a delicate line, I guess, that you got to sort of walk down.
Yeah, and I think that we've done it well. You know, we approach all of our programs and endeavors with that first and foremost in
Sure.
our minds. And it's always, you know, the families, if any family even remains. I mean, we're such an old cemetery that a lot of times that isn't even the case. But I believe that everyone who knows about the work we do realizes how much we care about Laurel Hill and how much we care about preserving it. And, you know, as far as cemeteries go, families are assured in knowing that their loved ones are always going to be memorialized and remembered and celebrated at Laurel Hill Cemetery. And they appreciate, I think almost everyone can appreciate kind of irreverence every once in a while,
Sure.
and not taking death all that seriously, because after all, we're part and parcel.
Yeah. And this resting place for so many people really reads as a who's who of great Philadelphians from the colonial days up until contemporary times. And, you know, people may want to just turn out and pay their respects to those folks that went before us. And as you said, you know, many history buffs like to go to the archives and see some of the documents pertaining to the interment of the Civil War general. People may be interested in writing a book or doing a movie on, you know, somebody that happens to be interred at Laurel Hill. And so this cemetery provides them with a great resource to do their research.
Absolutely. Our resources are likewise limited, as well as our themes and, you know, everything which I've mentioned previously. We're a green space. We were founded as an arboretum, and, you know, we're continuing in that legacy as well, bordering Fairmount Park, overlooking the Schuylkill River. Because of our scenery and just our general environment, we have a lot of contemporary connections as well. 4 movies were just shot here in the past few years. The most recent being Transformers 2,
Right.
which was out in theaters this past summer. There's another movie set to release this October, Law Abiding Citizen,
Right.
Jamie Foxx and Gerard Butler. We've had Happy Tears with Demi Moore, and we've had Rocky VI, the most final incarnation of the series. So, you know, when big films come to town, they recognize Laurel Hill as kind of a place apart. and Hollywood likes us.
Sure.
And we like Hollywood. So that's given us a lot of exposure on a national level even.
Now, if someone wants to come and see, and you talked about Rocky VI, because as soon as I saw that scene where Rocky Balboa is at the gravesite of his wife, Adrian, I knew exactly where this, I had an idea, because you could, if you pay attention and look real close in the background, you see the Schuylkill Expressway behind you. Now, if someone wants to go out to where that scene was shot, if they went to the office, would somebody there be able to direct them to that general location of where that scene was shot?
We have people coming in all the time wondering
Really?
that, and we do direct you. And they'll be happy to know also that the gravestone that was in the movie for Adrian, that he visited, that was a real gravestone. And when his film crew left, they left the stone there. So we've actually moved that from the shooting location, since the film was shot on property that belonged to families. And we moved that next to our gatehouse. So you can actually take a picture of the stone, sit in the same chair that Sylvester Stallone
The folding
sat
chair. I
in.
was
Yep.
wondering if it was still in the, because you used to put it in the
Yes,
tree, right?
exactly.
So this folding chair is still there
It's
too.
still there. And we can absolutely direct you to the place where the film was shot.
Interesting. So it's as I said at the outset of the program, if you're looking for something totally different to do, this might be the place to go. So have you seen your visitor numbers go up as you get more and more of the word out of the events that you're doing? And I'm intrigued by the cell phone tour, because people may say, yeah, I'd like to go out there, I want to do the guided tour myself. How does that work? How does the cell phone tour? Now, of course, you're paying for the minutes on
Right.
your phone, but it is a free tour. All you're paying is on your cell phone bill for taking that tour.
Right. While we have self-guided books available, it can oftentimes be disorienting, especially for first-time visitors, because again, we are 78 acres, and
Sure.
as an historic cemetery, we don't have a whole lot of signage that tells people what sections they're in and whatnot. So this really helps to, I guess, address that problem that we've had in the past. Now, even if we don't have a public program scheduled, visitors can still come in the cemetery and take a quality, informative tour. That's a lot of fun too, and it has some great tidbits, including, Harry Callis recordings from the Phillies and NFL films and other ventures. So essentially, you call up on your cell phone, you punch in the numbers. There's different stops throughout the cemetery that correspond to a very self-explanatory map, and you hear the stories of the people that are buried there. But you don't need to listen to every story. You don't need to follow the tour chronologically. It's really whatever your interests are and at your own pace. And the fact that it is free, it really is accessible programming that anyone can do. While the bulk of our guided tours and other public workshops generally have a fee, because again, we are a nonprofit, this cell phone tour is completely free.
And so when you have this audio tour via cell phone, you sort of scope out the various areas of the cemetery, and there might be a compelling story of someone who's buried there that you decide to feature on the cell phone tour. Is that how that works? Because if there's 100,000 people buried there, there's 100,000 stories
Exactly.
that somebody might find interesting.
And most of those stories we'll never know about.
Sure.
This cell phone tour just launched this past summer, and it actually only covers our north section. So Laurel Hill actually is comprised of 3 sections: the north, central, and south. The north is our oldest, so we decided to start there. And we really took a lot of time to part down to those highlights, those must-hear stories. You don't hear everything, but fortunately we have enough programs in a variety of themes that if you come back enough, then you
Sure.
eventually will hear everything.
In the 3 minutes that we have left, I want to get into about the architecture a little bit, because all you have to do is, if you're driving by on Kelly Drive and you look up, you can see that there are so many different memorials that are there at the grave sites that overlook Kelly Drive. Anything that really stands out as in terms of when you tour, and you having worked there now for 4 years, and you don't know every nook and cranny, but
Right.
there've got to be some tremendous architectural works there of
There
people
are.
that have put monuments on graves to their loved ones.
Our most relevant section in terms of that is Millionaire's Row, and it's named that just because of the vastness of the monuments and mausoleums that are there. The people who are interred there could afford to, have the very best of the best sculpted or constructed, and that's what they did. But really, all of Laurel Hill, there's something to see in architecturally wherever you go. We do have a map specifically dedicated to some of those hot spots. The cemetery itself is the first garden cemetery. The cemetery was laid out by a landscape architect. So really just the design of the roadways and sections themselves are a work of art if you ever take a look at our map. So really the architecture of the place and the artistic beauty is at its heart.
Hours of operation real fast before we...
Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 4:30, and Saturday to Sunday, 9:30 to 5, and admission is free.
Okay. And again, if you want more information about what you can find at Laurel Hill Cemetery, we invite you to go to the website, which is thelaurelhillcemetery.org. Make sure you put the in there. So it's thelaurelhillcemetery.org. And you can also call for more information if you like, 215-228-8200. Well, this has been a fascinating. I got to come out. I've always passed it off of Kelly Drive, and I knew the scene in Rocky Balboa, the latest incarnation, perhaps the last incarnation of Sylvester Stallone's Rocky character. But we invite everybody to come out to Laurel Hill Cemetery and take a tour. It's been a fascinating half hour, Gwen, and I want to thank you for spending some time with us here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. And until the next time on the Philly Factor, my name is Paul Perello. Thanks so much for being with us.